radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday, August 14th. Hope everybody's having a fantastic week so far. I certainly am. Things are pretty amazing here in Barcelona, having a good time. And yeah, the only challenge is our internet. So I'm trying again. We'll see if we do better today. Please be quick on the chat to let me know if you observe problems on video, audio, or anything else. So we're taking another shot. It's a little late today. Here in Barcelona, it is 9 p.m. So I'm not sure how long the show will go today. We'll see how long it goes, and we'll go from there. All right. What's going on? People are here today. All right. I'm just looking at the chat quickly. Okay. First story up is the depressing story of the day. And that is, well, it's not a new story. It really broke last week. But strangely enough, I don't think I've commented on it on the show. I'm not sure exactly why. But it's probably the most important business story, I don't know, of the last few years maybe. It's a huge story, and that is that a judge ruled last week in the Justice Department's case against Google. And the judge ruled that indeed Google was in violation of antitrust law, that Google was a monopoly for the purpose, an illegal monopoly for the purposes of antitrust law. And he hasn't yet ruled on what should be done, but he submitted a 48-page, or maybe it's longer than that, ruling that is quite interesting, quite comprehensive in terms of its analysis. And it's truly shocking and bewildering. It is very much consistent, I guess, with the world in which we live, and people's attitude towards big business and people's views regarding the nature of antitrust, but it still is a truly shocking ruling. Remember, this lawsuit specifically deals not with ads, not with other units in Google. This particular lawsuit deals with Google's search engine and the so-called monopoly that Google supposedly has on search. The government argued that the problem here is that Google was preventing competition, and the primary way in which it was preventing competition was that it was engaged in these exclusive contracts with companies like Apple and others, in order to have their search, right, the core business of Google, be the default search. Now, they did not prevent Apple from allowing its customers to switch to Safari or to other search browsers for the search. Even with different browsers, you can adapt different search websites. The government acknowledged that Google had not prevented any of that from happening, just that it got a preferential position by the very fact that it was the default. The government also, they also said, look, even when we don't make Google search the default, people use Google search. And it's almost comical in the way the judge writes it, because he's basically saying, no matter what Google does, it seems like people just use Google search. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe because it's better. The judge didn't even deny that it was better, that Google was a successful company, that had built up this market position because of its own virtues. He acknowledged that. His problem was, he said, was not the fact that it had built it up. His problem, he said, was the fact that they were trying to maintain it. What? What are they supposed to do? Please come compete, come take market share from me. There was no discussion of the fact that maybe there's just no room for multiple search engines because of the nature of the networking effect, the nature of the internet. Maybe there are multiple reasons why there is no real competition to Google. Bottom line is that the judge acknowledged Google's greatness as a company. The judge acknowledged the innovation. The judge acknowledged that no matter what Google did, it was clear that people were using Google and wanted to use Google, but the fact that people kept drifting to Google no matter what Google did just confirmed to the judge that Google had a monopoly position and that no competitor could compete with Google because people always wanted to use Google. It's a catch-22. There's no way out of this. So we're now waiting for sentencing. Now, I just want to emphasize here, why is this even being pursued? What is the whole basis, fundamental basis for antitrust law? I mean, the fundamental here is economically a false view of markets, a complete misunderstanding of how markets work, and a platonic, out of Plato's philosophy, view of markets the way they should be in the world of forms, where there is so-called perfect competition. And this perfect competition comprises of firms that are not differentiated from one another. They're all exactly the same. They make the same product. They have the same information. They pursue the same goal. Everything's the same. But that is a complete perversion of the whole idea of market. The whole idea of market is competition, which means trying to find an edge and trying to improve and trying to get better and trying to and isolating those things that make you indeed better. Because of this weird conception of perfect markets, perfect competition, anything that deviates from perfect competition is often tolerated because I think people understand, even the people in the Justice Department or some of these judges understand that perfect competition is an impossibility. But so they allow it to deviate up to a point. Up to which point, I guess that is decided by judges and lawyers, not decided by the marketplace. Now, this is a massive economic fallacy and a massive economic, stupid model. It's a dumb model. It's a model that does not describe reality and cannot describe reality. It is a model that would produce poverty. It is a model that would destroy freedom and capitalism. It is an unhuman model because it doesn't describe human behavior and human beings. So perfect competition economically is what is behind this. And of course, monopolies are deemed as having having the ability to prevent competitors from entering their space because everybody has the same information and the same data. So a competitor has no advantage, has no ability to take market share from a monopolist because it can't do anything new, different. I mean, this is what you study in Econ 101 when you study perfect competition and monopoly. But of course, that is bizarre. I mean, I described last week the fact that OpenAI and other AI programs are, itching, eager to take market share from Google by using a different type of search, right? An AI and LLM-driven search algorithm. So there is competition. There's always competition. The competition often comes from unexpected places. It doesn't come from plain vanilla, doing exactly the same, no new information, no new anything. Competition comes from the innovators. Competition often comes from things that are completely new. My favorite example of this, or one of my favorite examples of this is, that I use a lot, is Standard Oil. I mean, Standard Oil was making oil, was refining oil for kerosene, which was used for lighting. And it was competed completely out of that business by Thomas Edison with electricity. Just like Google might be competed out of search with AI. So there's no such thing in a real market as no competition. The competition sometimes might be dormant, it might be waiting, it might not be competitive right now. But if the dominant player, the player with the large market share, does not act as if there's competition, then it will basically cede the market to the competition when it comes easily. Google is actively trying to sustain its position. That's its job, that's its responsibility, that's its commitment to its shareholders. Indeed, antitrust laws place the law against shareholders. They place the shareholders, in a sense, against managers. What managers should be doing is sustaining their profitability, sustaining their market position. And what antitrust law does is it tells us, no, you can't. It's illegal. Don't maximize shareholder wealth. Or maximize shareholder wealth under these crazy constraints where you can't defend your business. If you defend your business, well, you're defending a monopoly. Morally, the whole theory of perfect competition and monopolies that you learn in Economics 101 is driven by a morality of altruism, a morality of egalitarianism, a morality of equality of outcome. The idea that everything and everybody should be the same. Every deviation from the same, from equality, not of rights, not of freedoms, not of liberties, but equality of outcomes, opportunities and outcomes, which is the same thing. That sameness, we should all be the same. I've talked about that a lot. What's driven Pol Pot, what drove all the crazy nuts in history. But it fundamentally is what drives antitrust law. How dare some people be so much better than others? How dare some succeed when others have not? How dare some be different than others? Perfect competition is that competition in which everybody is the same. We have set ourselves up, and we have for decades, we have set ourselves up as the ideal, the Platonic ideal, the thing in the world of forms, the paradise that we all strive towards in some kind of afterlife, but maybe in this life as well, is sameness, equality, no difference. What a boring, horrible life that would be. So it is altruism which leads to egalitarianism, but it is egalitarianism, the evil of egalitarianism, the evil of everybody being equal in outcome and everybody being the same in outcome. That evil is what drives much of those who advocate for antitrust law. So this ruling is huge. It's the biggest case really since Microsoft. Ruling against it is similar to the ruling against Microsoft from that was in the late 1990s. So it's 25 years ago. It is. We will see what the remedy is. We'll get to that in a minute. But it really is an expression of, I think, the horrors that our culture. I mean, remember. Oh yeah, I wanted to make this point. Right. What is the problem with monopoly? They tell us in Econ 101. Well, the problem with monopoly is they raise prices and they lower quality. But what is the price for Google search? It's zero. Has the price ever been raised? No. The judge actually acknowledges this. What is the quality of the Google search? Well, I mean, we can all quibble with it. We can all have our, we don't like it or whatever. But the reality is that every time people are offered an alternative, they keep coming back to Google. So in the marketplace as we have today, it's probably the best product we have. So being good and offering something at a really good price, zero, is anti-competitive. So the judge acknowledges this. He says, yeah, that's right. But he says, the only reason Google keeps the price at zero, and the only reason Google keeps improving its product, is to maintain its market share. It's to maintain its market dominance. Yeah, duh, absolutely right. But how is that in any conceivable way? How is that in any conceivable way a bad thing? Isn't that what we want Google to do? To keep improving, trying to make our lives better. It costs us zero. And Ayn Rand said, when she wrote about antitrust, that it was the most irrational laws that we have in the books. That antitrust, the passage of the antitrust laws in the 1890s in the United States, were the beginning of the end of capitalism in the United States. That the first thing one should do if everyone got into political power would be to repeal the antitrust laws. That these were laws that were damaging, they were anti-ability, anti-success, anti-progress and achievement. And as such were some of the most evil laws on the books. And I think this case against Google is a good example of this. Now, what does the government want? Well, they're debating right now, okay, what should we ask the judge as a remedy to fix this? How do you fix it? Well, they're thinking of actually asking the judge to break Google up, to force it, to break up. You could imagine Google being forced to divest the Android operating system or the Google web browser, Chrome. Right? Maybe they could even sell, although I don't know what would remain, they could even spin off AdWords. I mean, it is incredible that they're spinning off all these things that, integral to the integrated business that is Google. And yet, this is what the government wants them to do. Now, note how the government here is putting itself in a position, a bunch of lawyers, and I guess with some economic consultants, are putting themselves in a position of this grand central planner who knows because he has wisdom, knows what the future holds. What will lead to more competitive markets? What will actually fix whatever problem they pretend exists? I mean, this is disgusting and despicable. Now, it also looks like, they're going to ask the judge to find a way to prevent Google from gaining an advantage in artificial intelligence products. Maybe by handcuffing them, maybe by cutting their arms off, maybe by forcing them to spin off any AI product that they might be developing. They certainly will ban the exclusive contracts that Google has with companies like Apple. But as the judge acknowledged, that doesn't matter. People still use Google search. This is the first time that the Justice Department is trying to dismantle a company for illegal monopolization since it luckily unsuccessfully, tried to do the same thing to Microsoft. They tried to break it up. They did not succeed in that. They crippled Microsoft in other ways, and I think they retarded progress in tech, who knows by how many years, because of what they did get through. But they didn't get to break up Microsoft, and let's hope they don't get to break up Google, and let's hope that Google gets by here with minimal damage. But I mean, this is really horrific and ridiculous and absurd. It is economic evil, the essence of economic evil, and as Ayn Rand said, it's the application of some of the worst laws on the books of the United States. And while it's true that nobody literally holds the idea that everybody should be the same, nobody actually holds that and argues for that. They hold that as a Platonic ideal, even if they don't recognize that they hold it as a Platonic idea. By the way, the whole issue of equity, the whole idea of intersectionality, the whole program of the modern left is exactly this egalitarian program. But many people hold equality of outcome as some kind of noble idea. You hear it from people who say, and a lot of people say this, communism's a good idea, it's just badly practiced. Or communism's a good idea, it's just not practical. So they have a Platonic ideal, and they say, you can't have everybody the same. But and even if they don't say it, that's what implicit in everything that they do. Like Anne says, they should call themselves the Injustice Department. Absolutely, they should call themselves the Injustice Department. So, by the way, everybody realizes this, and that this, bring in the politics of this for a second. You might all be thinking, oh my God, this is the Biden administration. This is so horrific. This is why we should have never elected Biden. This is the Injustice Department of the Biden administration. These leftists are going after Google. And, I understand why you would think that, but the reality is that this lawsuit was filed by the Trump Justice Department. Trump Justice Department filed this lawsuit. It was carried on by Biden. Biden certainly didn't scrap the lawsuit. But the idea that antitrust is a Democratic issue and not a Republican issue is just wrong. J.D. Vance is a huge fan of Lena Khan at the FCC, who is just horrible on issues of antitrust. Trump's Justice Department filed the lawsuit against Google. Trump was very much about breaking up big tech. So no, this is not a Democratic Republican thing, sadly. That would make life easier. This is a bipartisan initiative. Trump, this is Trump's Department of Justice. No major lawsuit like this that is filed by the Department of Justice without the president giving it a thumbs up. It's a huge political issue. It's a huge policy issue. If Trump had said to the Justice Department, as previous presidents have done, I'm not that interested in antitrust, don't go after Google and those companies, then they wouldn't have gone after them. But Trump did exactly the opposite. He wanted them to go after Amazon. All the cases against Amazon, Apple, Google, and I think against Microsoft, all of them that are in the courts right now, were launched. Not launched. This one was actually filed under Trump. But they were all, the research, the work, everything was started under the Trump administration. It was a policy of the Trump administration. So, and again, this is to all of you who think that there's a difference when it comes to economic liberty between our political parties. There's very little difference. All right, talk about politics, the politics of the day. Kamala Harris seems to be doing phenomenally well in the polls. She now has a lead on Trump, depending on the polls you look at. Certainly in the big Midwestern states and Pennsylvania, so Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, these are the states that she has to win if she is going to win the presidency. She seems to be leading in all three states by 4 percentage points, which is the best showing Democrats have had in a very long time. Now, it is true that polls, at least in 2016 and 2020, underestimated Trump's numbers, so that 4 percentage point lead might not be real. It's hard to tell, but just a few weeks ago, Trump was leading in all those states. Was leading Biden in all those states. Kamala is also seems to be winning and doing well in Nevada, and even Arizona and Georgia, and North Carolina might flip blue. That would be pretty amazing. But they do have a very popular Democratic governor, and the demographics in that state are shifting. So it is hard. You know, it does look like, right? It does look like she has real momentum. I think partially it's that she's not Trump, but of course Biden was not Trump and he didn't have this. I really do think that it's about youth and energy. It's about not the old guard. It's not about ideas because she's making a real effort not to talk about ideas. We will see. Ian says in 2022, everybody overestimated Republicans. That's true. But we're talking about presidential campaigns and presidential elections 2016 and 2020 underestimated Trump's appeal significantly. And I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, good pollsters adjust for that. They figure out what they got wrong last time and they adjust for it. So we'll see. But certainly the momentum seems to be right now with Kamala. I think Trump is panicking a little bit as a consequence. And Kamala seems like the energetic one. Again, Trump is running about as bad of a campaign as you could imagine. I don't think, in 2016, as awful as Trump is, he ran what was a brilliant campaign. He was on message in terms of what his message was. It was a message of lies and distortions and perversions, but he got on message and he kept repeating it and he stuck to it, and it was overall a message that resonated with the American people. It was, I've said this many times, it was the life sucks in America right now. There's crime, there's all this awful things going on, the economy is going to hell. Even though none of that was true, it doesn't matter. He convinced the American people, and I think a lot of people felt that coming out of the Tea Party movement. People felt like, America was in decline, everything was bad, everything was horrible, we were going to hell. And he said, and it's not you. You guys are great. You guys are the people who make America great. It's the Chinese, and it's immigrants, and it's the elites. And, there's only one person in the world who knows how to deal with this. I'm not going to tell you exactly how I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to dry the swamp, whatever that means. But the only person in the world who can deal with all this stuff, with the Chinese and with the immigrants and with the elites and with the others who you should be afraid of because they're causing all this mayhem and destruction in America, is me. And that is a brilliant formula. It's a formula that authoritarians have used for decades and decades and decades. Populists have used, and it worked. And he couldn't run on that in 2020 because in 2020 he was the president. So he couldn't say the world sucked. So I think to a large extent that's why he lost. But in 2016, he was unbelievably disciplined on that formula, and that formula won it for him. It might have been Bannon. Bannon ran his campaign. I wouldn't be surprised if that is who came up with this formula. It really is brilliant. But he's not doing that today. What's he running on today? He's kind of running on things are awful, terrible, absolutely. He blames Biden, and he blames the Democrats, and he blames immigration, but it's very, what do you call it? It's very unfocused. And his argument is, I did it before, I fixed it before, I fix it again, but nobody's completely convinced he fixed it last time because, hey, he lost and Biden's around, so how big of a fix could it have been if we're back to where we were before? And he's just not a message. He doesn't even talk that much about those things. He's so busy complaining about the size of Kamala Harris's, turnout in her rallies, or he's too busy complaining about, all the criminals coming from El Salvador, and the criminals in El Salvador are all in jails. They're not coming to the United States. Or he's making stuff up that is just absurd and ridiculous, and then he's too busy complaining about the 2020 elections. He's too busy with trivialities and unimportant stuff. He's too busy with his own grievances. He's too busy whining. In 2016, he actually ran, I don't know if disciplined is the right word, but he actually ran a clear message. It was clear what this was about. All wrong, but still clear. This time, I think people are just sick of it. He just whines, he complains, and people don't want it. So I don't know how this election is going to turn out. It looks like it's going to be very close, but right now, Kamala has the momentum, and it does seem like Trump is panicking. That Trump is panicking. I think he's 8 years older. He's 78, and God, I mean, these are the ages where you deteriorate. I mean, we saw that with Biden clearly, but for everybody, I just don't think a 78-year-old is just as sharp and as focused and as a 70-year-old, and that is particularly the case. Andrew will like this. This particular case, when you're a horrible human being with a no self-esteem and a mushy mind, which is what Trump is. So it's not surprising that he has deteriorated between the age of 70 and 78. All right. Let us see. He was confident with Biden as the nominee because it was so self-evident, it was so obvious that Biden was just in such bad shape that all Trump had to do was show up, was have some energy, be able to string a sentence together, and he would win. Biden was this just ridiculous target, but it's not the case with Kamala. And not that she's intelligent, not that she's smart, not that she has anything, but she's not senile. She can't be ridiculed for that on a daily basis. Now he could, and this is the point I've made a couple of times now, the last couple of days, he could focus on what's bad about her ideas, her policies. And he could just hammer away at those. But for that, he would have to be, again, disciplined. He would have to care. He would have to be energized around the issues rather than energized around grievances. So Trump today is not the Trump of 8 years ago. He was bad then. He's worse now. And he's a much worse campaigner now. Much worse campaigner now. All right, Ukraine. God, they keep pushing on in Kursk. The Russians suggested that they had stopped the Ukrainian advance. Russia is clearly pulling troops out of Ukraine to go and beef up the protection of this area in Russia. You remember the Ukrainians invaded Russia. But by all accounts, that is not working, and Ukrainian forces continue to advance within Russia. And while they're meeting more and more resistance, they seem to be able to overcome that resistance, and they seem to be able to fight through it. This is super embarrassing and super difficult for the Russians, which is great. It's making a fool of Putin. Again, I still don't know and don't completely understand the kind of longer-term strategy where the Ukrainians go with this. They're not driving to Moscow, I assume, but where are they driving? Where are they going? What do they plan to do? Is hard to tell. I mean, again, if they could come behind the Russians and cut off the supply lines, that would be amazing. But it doesn't seem like that's the direction they're heading. So we will see. I mean, there must be a strategy here, and hopefully they know what they're doing. So Russia is pulling troops from the front lines in Ukraine. That plays into Ukraine's hands. There also, even if Ukraine leaves the Kursk region and Russians retake it, they will now have to, in a sense, beef up their troops along the 1,000-mile border with Ukraine. That is good for Ukraine, because that would mean it divert troops away from troops fighting in the front line in Ukraine itself. So this is fascinating. It's fascinating as a military strategy. It's fascinating how it will all evolve. So I'm really looking forward to watching this and seeing what happens. And I will keep you updated about it. Last night, the Ukrainians did carry out their largest long-range drone strike of the whole war on 4 Russian military airfields, trying to take out the ability of the Russians to use the Su-50-something, to kind of go up in the air, not approach Ukrainian airspace so that they're not being attacked by the air defense systems, but from that point, drop glide bombs, which are these bombs that have really been hitting and hurting Ukraine. So they're trying to attack the Air Force bases in which these airplanes are at. They've taken out a number of Russian airplanes. I can't pronounce it. It's SU. We'll call it SU, which is their technical name. And they hit them in four different bases, including in Kursk, which is now not that far from their advancing troops. So the war in Ukraine is horrific, fascinating from a strategic perspective, fascinating from a political perspective, fascinating in terms of just Putin and what happens there. One of the big downsides of the war in Ukraine is the chumminess, the cooperation that has evolved between Russia and China. And indeed, we're seeing more and more joint military operations between the two. We've seen them flying joint kind of training runs, even entering Alaskan airspace and being shooed away by the Americans. We've seen them do some joint naval operations in the Pacific. But the coordination between Russia and China is I think, scary. China would have a lot easier time taking Taiwan if it could rely on the Russian Navy to distract the West, doing its own thing. While China is much richer and potentially has a much stronger and certainly a much more technically advanced, technologically advanced military than Russians do, they have a lot less experience at war. They haven't fought a war in decades. The last war they fought, I think, was in the 80s or 90s with Vietnam, but it was a very low-tech war between two pretty poor countries. They could gain a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge from Russian strategists and Russian, not that they've done that well in Ukraine, but Russian expertise at war. Russians have done war for hundreds of years. The Chinese have mainly fought within China. They haven't projected force outside of China in a very long time. Again, the war with Vietnam is one example. I'm sure there've been others, but nothing like Russia's experience with war. Combination is not good. China has this amazing manufacturing capabilities. It can produce probably more bombs in a day than anybody in the world by far. It has high tech. It has computer high tech, maybe AI technologies that the Russians don't have. Just generally, that combo is very dangerous for the free world. Not something we should take lightly, should be monitored. And again, the more we help Ukraine actually beat Russia, the less attractive to China is a military alliance with the Russians. So, yeah, we should support Ukraine. We should support Ukraine in crushing the Russians, at least getting the Russians out of Ukraine and maybe taking some territory from Russia. That would be a historical shift. Talk about weapons. The Biden administration has approved the sale or the shipment of $750 million worth of bombs to the Saudis in the coming months. Now, this has been a sticking point between the Saudis and the Americans because the Biden administration didn't want to release these bombs because they were complaining about the Saudis bombing civilians in Yemen, in the Saudis' war against the Houthis. Those same Houthis now who are blocking shipping. Maybe we should have encouraged the Saudis to bomb more. Maybe we should have helped the Saudis win that war. Maybe we wouldn't be facing the absurdities and the nuttiness that we have right now, where we have to bomb the Houthis, and we won't bomb the right people, the right places, so the Houthis don't get any weaker, because we are afraid to bomb them in any kind of severe way. If we had the Saudi Arabia right now putting pressure on the Houthis in war, things would be a lot better. But the Saudis stopped that war because President Biden put pressure on them. In 2021, Biden halted the shipments of weapons to Saudi Arabia as a punishment for their war with Yemen. And they said they would only release the weapons once Saudi Arabia behaved itself with regard to the Houthis. So the Saudis have. They basically are in negotiations with some kind of deal with the Houthis, have been for over a year. So the Biden administration said, oh, you're behaving yourself. Okay, you can have the weapons. Now, what do they need the weapons if they're going to behave themselves? The only reason to have weapons is to blow people up. I mean, it's just more evidence, the whole situation in the Middle East, of course, but the Houthis and the Saudis is a good evidence of, when you don't have a strategy, when you don't know what you're doing, when you only think short term, when you don't only conceive of the big picture, then you're not going to win. And indeed, the United States should have encouraged the Saudis to wipe out the Houthis, because the Houthis are allied with Iran, which is a strategic enemy of the United States. And if you were thinking strategically, and if you were thinking Iran is the enemy, we should weaken Iran's, the organizations that Iran supports as much as possible. We should weaken their presence throughout the Middle East. Then we would have encouraged the Saudis to go after the Houthis. But it's like, oh, a lot of people are dying. It's not a good wars are not good. We don't like escalation. We don't get, so let's let's stop that war. Let's just end wars. Ending wars is good. And what you did by relieving the pressure that the Saudis were placing on the Houthis, what you got was the Houthis that were ready then to deploy their resources to stopping the shipping towards the Suez Canal as soon as the opportunity arose, and that opportunity, of course, was the war in Gaza. So no strategic thinking, no strategic considerations, and we should be encouraging the Saudis now to launch an offensive against the Houthis. Maybe they can occupy Yemen and open up the shipping lanes. Thinking is something our politicians and our strategists and our foreign policy people just don't do. There's just no foreign policy strategy. There's just no foreign policy thinking in terms of, American interest and what those American interests are in the long run. All right, finally, in terms of foreign policy, let's talk about Israel. Again, nothing happening, so still sitting. It might be that the Iranians and everybody else is waiting to see what happens in the negotiations, which I think start tomorrow, about a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Israel is sending a delegation. The Americans are going to be there. Qataris are going to be there. The Egyptians are going to be there. The only people who probably will not be there, although that could change by tomorrow, Hamas. Hamas has said they're not interested. They're not coming. The ceasefire is between Israel and Hamas. So, but Hamas said, send us a proposal. We'll see if we accept it. It's interesting how Hamas is so weak. Militarily, they're so weak in every respect. They've been destroyed, and much of its leadership has been eviscerated. And yet, they have moral certainty. They have the confidence. They have, from their perspective, morality on their side. And as a consequence, they are acting as if they're winning. Anyway, this meeting is going to happen tomorrow. And it could very well be that both Hezbollah and the Iranians and everybody else is kind of sitting on their hands waiting to see what happens and if there is a ceasefire. I think there's a lot of anxiety in Israel as well about what kind of deal is cut, if a deal is cut, what kind of a deal is cut, how much is Israel going to have to give up in order to get the hostages, how much is Israel going to have to give up the kind of the strategic initiative in destroying Hamas and in preventing Hamas from ever gaining a foothold in the Gaza Strip again. I can't imagine a deal is it will be a good deal. I suspect that any deal would be a failure, that any deal would be giving up the achievements that Israel has already made, the success that Israel already has had in decapitating Hamas. But there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu and the Israeli government to cut a deal. And not just from the Biden administration, but also from within Israel. And it's going to be interesting to see if anything happens. I suspect nothing will happen with the deal because Hamas doesn't want it. You would think nothing would happen because Israel doesn't want it, but it just shows you who has in diplomacy, who has the strategic mindset. There is growing support within Israel, including within the Israeli military and particularly the command of the Northern Front. There's growing support in Israel for a preemptive strike against Hezbollah and basically Israel dealing with Hezbollah once and for all. I don't see that I don't see the political will to do that. Netanyahu has never done anything like this before, and I don't think he's going to do anything like this now. But there is pressure building with Israel. Again, there are tens of thousands of Israeli civilians who live in the northern border who have been evacuated and who cannot go back to their homes, cannot resume a normal life. The promises were made to them about the beginning of the school year, but the beginning of the school year is just around the corner, and nothing has happened. I find it hard to believe that a negotiated deal can be achieved with Hezbollah, although I know that the French and the Americans are trying to negotiate some kind of deal, but I think it's almost zero. Now, Hezbollah said that if Hamas cuts a deal with Israel, they will stop shooting rockets into Israel. But that is, I think the perspective should be, who cares, right? Reality. You have to face reality. If not now, then in the future, at some point, Hezbollah is still dedicated to destruction of Israel. It's not like Hamas. It has not been weakened dramatically like Hamas has. And if you don't take them out now, you'll have to take them out later. What is Israel waiting for? This is a war it should initiate, and I mean initiate in the sense of dramatically escalate. Hezbollah has already initiated it, and they should take out Hezbollah, and they should get rid of them, and so they stop being this threat that is a constant threat against the northern border. I mean, given what Hamas did in the south on October 7th, how can Israeli civilians go back home on the northern border with the threat that Hezbollah could do exactly the same thing? You know, storm the border, cross over, go into civilian populations and kill and slaughter. Yeah, I mean, they have to be dealt with. They have to be destroyed. They have to be decapitated completely. And, you know, in terms of the leadership, and Israel's not doing it. Again, although there is growing interest in doing it, it's not doing it. There's no political will to do it. All right, I want to get to the Intel story. We'll get to that in a minute. This is a weird story. I don't know what to think about this. It's very strange. We didn't cover this on the Yaron Brook show. I don't know why exactly, but I didn't talk about this. But a couple of weeks ago, the United States arrested Mexico's most wanted drug lord. They arrested the Sinaloa cartel leader Ismael El Mayo Zambada. And they arrested him in the United States when he unexpectedly appeared on a flight, a private plane in El Paso, Texas. This is in July, so I guess it's a month ago. And he just showed up and was handed over to the FBI. Now, that private plane was arranged by another drug couple who decided to turn himself in. This is Joaquim Guzman Lopez, the son of the imprisoned cartel leader Joaquim El Chapo Guzman. He basically flew to the United States to turn himself in, did Joaquim Guzman Lopez. I don't know why. I don't know what he was promised. I mean, this whole episode is weird and bizarre. Anyway, he came in to turn himself in. Maybe he was afraid he was going to get killed in Mexico. I don't know. But on the way, he kidnapped Zambada. He basically arranged for a meeting with him. When the guy showed up, he basically had him handcuffed and put on a plane and brought to the United States. So the whole story is bizarre. And I don't know what's behind it. Maybe this is why I didn't talk about it before, because the pieces just seem really, really strange. Anyway, the Mexican government now has thrown a even weirder spin on this. You would think that the Mexican government would thank the United States and thank Joaquim Guzman Lopez for arranging the capture and the arrest of the most wanted cartel leader in Mexico. I mean, they basically took out the number one most wanted guy in Mexico. This is the Sinaloa cartel is one of the most violent, horrific, just spread violence and terror across the entire Mexico. It's just and it's been doing so for decades. So you'd think that Mexico would thank the United States for this, but no. Instead, the Mexican prosecutors are considering bringing treason, I'm not kidding, treason charges against Guzman for handing over Zambada to the Americans. And the treason charges might be against anybody who is involved in this conspiracy. So I don't know, maybe you guys can make sense of this. It doesn't make any sense to me. it seems like a completely nutty, crazy story. Maybe somebody will make a movie, and in the movie they'll explain what happened, because I mean, this is a script. There's a script there. It's just a matter of figuring out, creating everything around it. But there's a script there. If anybody wants to write scripts for movies, this is going to make a great movie one day. All right, quick positive. The technology for oil drilling, like fracking and stuff like that, they never stop developing. They're constantly figuring out new ways to get oil out of the ground. And, all the stuff about peak oil, running out of oil, I mean, the oil companies don't know anything about this because they're constantly trying to get more oil out of the ground. The latest is an ultra-high pressure drilling technology that Chevron is using in the Gulf of Mexico, which is going to dramatically increase the amount of oil they can extract out of the Gulf. Chevron announced this week the ultra-high pressure drilling technology, and it's launched a production at its $5.7 billion anchor project in the Gulf. This is in the water, right? By all accounts, this is a real breakthrough. It's going to make drilling in the Gulf of Oil even more economical than it has been. They believe that this can unlock 5 billion barrels of oil that was known but was inaccessible globally, right? 2 billion of those in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico alone. So, I mean, these fantastic entrepreneurs constantly figuring out new ways to do things and new ways to get those fossil fuels so that we can drive our cars and we can run electricity in our homes and everywhere else. Truly amazing, truly stunning, and we should be celebrating. We should really, really be celebrating these. All right, let's talk about chips. So I think last week was the 2-year anniversary of the CHIPS Act. This was a bipartisan act that was passed by Congress in an attempt to make the United States a major production hub for chip manufacturing, and not just any chip manufacturing. The whole focus of the CHIPS Act was to bring to the United States the cutting-edge chips, and it was deemed both an economic necessity, but it was also framed, of course, as it always is, in national security. The Pentagon, our weapons manufacturers use the most advanced chips in the world, and we don't make any of those chips in the United States. All of those chips are made basically by 2 companies, by TSMC in Taiwan and by Samsung in Korea. I think they make over 90% of all the highly advanced chips in the world. And the idea was we need them in the United States for national security, but really more important than that, because that would have been a narrow solution, more important than that, we need to become a chip powerhouse. We need to bring manufacturing back home. This is part of industrial policy. This is part of, again, this was passed by Biden. It received Republican support. People like J.D. Vance and Josh Hawley love this kind of stuff, as generally does Donald Trump. The CHIP Act allocated tens of billions of dollars, basically as subsidies, loans and subsidies, grants they call them, to anybody who committed to building and manufacturing advanced chips in the United States. A number of companies have gotten money. We all know about the plant that TSMC is building in Arizona, and Samsung is building a chip manufacturing plant in Texas. But it's very clear that neither TSMC nor Samsung has any plans to actually build their most advanced chips in the United States. I mean, this is not easy, right? Building a chip manufacturing plant maybe is hard enough. Just the construction of it requires special conditions, the building itself. But you need massive numbers of PhDs and masters in computer science and in hardware. There is a massive shortage of people to work in these facilities. And then TSMC and Samsung see no advantage in building the most advanced chips in the United States. They have economies of scale already in their own facilities at home. Indeed, Samsung is building some massive facilities in South Korea, subsidized in that case by the South Korean government. TSMC is building 2 nanometers. Is that what they call it? Nano something. Chips in Taiwan. It's going to go into production of those probably later this year, or early next year. It's going to make them in bulk, in large quantities. Why do it in 2 different plants when they can do it all in the one plant in Taiwan? The chips that they're probably going to make in Arizona are probably 2 generations behind. These are not the national security chips that they need. Samsung the same. It's not going to bring its cutting edge leading technology to the United States to a large extent because they don't think they can necessarily get the kind of quality that they can get back in Asia because of the quality of the workers and because of the quality of the facilities. Just to give you one example, in Taiwan, if at 1 a.m., TSMC runs its factories in Taiwan 24/7, literally 24/7. And in Taiwan, if a machine breaks at 1 a.m., there's somebody there trying to fix it within an hour, even if it's at 2 a.m. They'll wake them up, or they're on call, and they'll bring them over to fix it, whoever that needs to be. If a machine breaks in the United States at 1 a.m., nobody's going to look at it before 9 a.m. in the morning. To bring the kind of work culture, work environment that the Taiwanese have to the United States, it's just not going to happen. This is, by the way, one of the reasons for what's called offshoring, the moving of production overseas, is because labor conditions in the United States are such that you can't produce as much and as cheaply as you can in Taiwan. And look, people who work in TSMC in Taiwan make a lot of money. They do very, very well. They're not being exploited. They just have a commitment and a level of commitment to their job and a level of willingness to engage in that work that Americans just don't have anymore. South Koreans actually work more hours on average than anybody in the world. So it's very hard to compete in the United States. And these companies are not fools. The only reason at the end of the day that they're building manufacturing plants in the United States is because they're getting subsidized by the government. They're getting money, free money. And yeah, they'll produce something, they'll make money here. But they'll produce and they'll make money the stuff that they don't want to make in Taiwan and the stuff that they can make over here. And at a relatively low risk position. So really the hopes of our politicians, our political class, lie at the end of the day, not so much in TSMC and Samsung. After all, that's a Taiwanese company and a South Korean company. To hell with them. The real hopes of the government in building chips, in getting chips built in the United States, the real Ian says, I used to go to work at 3 a.m. when I got a text about needing to do something. It happens in the U.S. It does happen in the U.S. Of course it does. Silicon Valley could have never existed. It doesn't happen on scale. And it doesn't happen as easily and as often as it does in Taiwan and in South Korea. And labor laws in the United States make it very difficult for these things to happen. We have labor laws that make it, for some professions, those labor laws are loosened and made easier, but it's very difficult. There's a whole story in the Financial Times, I think it's today, 2 days ago, August 12th, about the fact that, there's just, we don't have the labor in the United States. Never mind going in at 3 a.m. You don't have people. You don't have enough PhDs. You don't have enough master's degrees. You don't have enough people to do this kind of work. It just doesn't exist. And the people you do have are going to cost a lot more money than they do in Taiwan. And the cost of production is going to be very, very high. And the level of commitment is just not as high as it is over there. So the hopes of the U.S. government are not with Samsung and TSMC. The hopes of the U.S. government are with a national champion. Like every statist country has a national champion. The Chinese have national champions. Huawei is a national champion. They get a lot of money and help from the government, and they produce great products, and they employ a lot of people. And the U.S. government wants great national champions in the United States, and the national champion that they have really focused on and chosen for in the chip business is Intel. Intel is a legendary company, of course. It is part of the history of the semiconductor industry. It's part of the history of tech. The world would be a very different place if not for Intel. And yet, Intel is in real trouble. We saw the news the other week about Intel's layoffs, and it just lost $1.6 billion, some ridiculous amount of money. Its stock price is down, 70% or something like that. Intel's been, though, in trouble for a long time. And Intel's not in trouble because of unfair competition from other countries that are subsidizing their industries. Intel is in trouble because it has made bad business decisions. And TSMC and Samsung have made good business decisions. Intel, it has been in trouble for about at least 15 years, from the early 2010s. And it has fallen behind systematically. Its technology is way behind that of TSMC and Samsung. So when Intel wants to build 3 nanometer manufacturing, if they want to make a chip like that, they outsource it to TSMC. They don't make it themselves. They have, refused to, for example, embrace this idea. The industry is basically bifurcated. TSMC specializes in fabricating the chips, making the physical chip. They don't design chips. They get designs from other companies like NVIDIA. NVIDIA sends them, or Apple. They send them the design, and TSMC just fabricates it, just makes it. And they have become the world champions, the best in the world at making the chips. They're specialized. Intel is used to designing their own chips and making their own chips, doing it all in-house. When it has been suggested over and over again to Intel, maybe they should make chips designed by other companies. Maybe they should provide foundry services, fabrication services to other companies. Intel has said for years, no, no, no. Now, only recently have they been willing to do that. But as a consequence, they have lost out on clearly the superior business model. They have lost out on an enormous amount of revenue, and in the meantime, they've beefed up their competitors. Massive strategic mistake. Intel missed out on the shift, this is over a decade ago, missed out on the shift from PCs to smartphones. Indeed, they told Apple they weren't interested in designing and providing chips for the iPhone. Ultimately led them to lose the PC business of Apple as well. when Apple ended up designing their own chips for the iPhone, which are produced, fabricated by TSMC, yes. So they missed out on the entire phone, which is a huge number of chips, right? They missed out more recently on AI, on the whole AI revolution, on the AI chips, on the demand for AI chips, on building AI chips. They had a chance to invest in ChatGPT, OpenAI, and they didn't. Instead, ChatGPT teamed up with Microsoft. They let NVIDIA and AMD dominate the GPU space, designing GPUs. Intel clung to its CPU approach, which is less suited for AI. And they have repeatedly failed over and over again to make a viable AI chip. In the same time that many other companies have designed feasible AI chips, again, manufactured by others. So Intel has been a failure over and over and over again certainly over the last 15 years. And yet, and it might be that Intel should just go out of business. And that some of that capital should be deployed to other chip manufacturers in the United States who maybe can do a better job. It's also quite possible that the United States should just focus on designing chips, which we're obviously very, very good at. All the top designing firms for chips are in the United States. And let the chips be built elsewhere. But no, our politicians have decided that we must have chip manufacturing capabilities in the United States. And we must have a national champion with regard to chips. And that national champion must be Intel. And by doing so, we are rewarding failure. We're rewarding bad decision making. We're rewarding inferior technology. Indeed, the government is pouring money into Intel. Grants, loans, tax credits. Intel is building a massive, the largest supposedly chip manufacturing facility in the world, in, of all places, the heart of where you would expect to build a chip manufacturing plant. Where are you going to build a chip manufacturing plant? Somewhere with lots of PhDs in computer sciences, right? Lots of knowledge, lots of expert employees. Yep, you guessed it, Ohio. Intel is building the largest chip manufacturing plant in Ohio, supposedly. Right? Why? This is it's complete insanity. The subsidies were handed. The politicians called Intel, quote, America's champion semiconductor company. Again, a company that's failed. Building a manufacturing plant, with all due respect to Ohio, in the middle of nowhere. Intel Ohio is going to have supplier concerns. So some of the suppliers that were supposed to open facilities near Intel are now bailing out on it. Why Ohio, by the way? Why would the Biden administration want a chip manufacturing plant to be built in Ohio? I wonder if it has anything to do with Ohio being an important political state, because it's certainly not the first state that comes to mind when you think about tech. The first state when you come to mind when you think about talent for chip making. Ohio doesn't jump out at you, right? Yeah, so generally, Intel is being rewarded for being no good, for being a failure. And we saw that in the results last week. 1,500 people laid off in an industry that is struggling to find people. Intel got money from the government partially to hire people, not to fire them. Intel's losing huge amounts of money. Nobody knows exactly how bad things are. Intel is spending enormous amounts of money on lobbying. while it's losing a lot of money. It's spending a lot of money on lobbying. And the government is saying they're not going to throw bad money after bad money. They're not good money after bad money. They're not going to double up on Intel unless if they don't show results. But really, do you think that's actually going to happen? It's a disaster, as industrial planning almost always is. Do you remember Solyndra? Remember that was a big scandal under Obama. The government had funded, was it a solar panel production facility? Government had funded the solar panel production facility, and they went bankrupt, and the government money was gone, and it was a big stink. Did Obama lose the election because of that? No. Nobody cares. And this is the problem, right? The problem is that the government has billions and billions and billions of dollars, really trillions of dollars, that it can spend any way it wants to because nobody cares. Nobody is monitoring. Nobody pays attention. Nobody votes based on it. And really the two political parties just compete on who's going to give more goodies away. And all that does is it encourages businesses to go to Washington for handouts, to lobby, to demand their piece of the pie. I mean, if Intel's getting money, what about Micron Semiconductors, and what about new companies that might want to make chips? And of course, what happens to all the young entrepreneurs who might think, ooh, I can build a better company than Intel? Well, they're discouraged because they're not going to get any subsidy. Nobody's going to subsidize a startup. You know, we have this amazing, still, segments of America have this amazing business engine, technology, startups, innovation, venture capital. It's still unmatched in the world. There's no place like the United States in terms of the ability, that ability. And we're systematically dismantling it. We're systematically destroying it. And we're destroying it by trying to save it, by trying to boost it, by trying to subsidize it and help it and give it more money and give it more support. And that is what will kill it. That is what will kill it. It would be much better for Intel to go bust, for its assets and talent to be redistributed through a bankruptcy process to the people who could best use those resources. Let some startup take over some of the facilities and some of the people that Intel has and maybe build a company as great, if not greater, than Intel was. But that is not politically viable. That is not what our politicians will allow. Intel will be bailed out, will continue to be bailed out. They're not going to walk away from all the money they've given them in spite of the fact that they say they will. They won't. It's not politically feasible, particularly not in Ohio right now. And J.D. Vance is from Ohio. You know, everybody wants Ohio. So it ain't happening. And Intel, CHIP Act will turn out to be, nobody will ever talk about it this way, but it'll be a huge boondoggle. Be one more nail in the coffin of American capitalism. And but nobody will care. Nobody votes on these issues. Nobody cares about issues. Nobody runs on these issues. It's much more important, the crowd size of Kamala's audience, that rallies, that's much more important than the CHIP Act, which, Trump could make a big deal out of. You've just wasted $70 billion on this chip stuff. Nothing's happening. Nothing's going right. This is incredibly destructive. Yeah, but they're not going to raise those issues. Partially because it's not a winning issue politically. All right, on that wonderful positive note, let us move to the Super Chat. We'll call that the news for August 14th. All right, let's see. Before we get going with the Super Chat, I'll remind you that this program is funded through the support of people like you. Can't do this without you guys. You can support the show in a variety of different ways. You can support the show with a monthly contribution on Patreon. Patreon is great. Just don't make the contribution on the Patreon app on your phone. Do it on the website. Because if you do it on the phone, Apple takes 30%. So Patreon, you could also do it through PayPal. And you can get to the PayPal through yaronbrookshow.com/membership. So Patreon, PayPal. If you've got other ideas on how you want to support me, send me an email, yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. Happy to accept any form of contribution that you can. You can wire the money to me, you can Venmo it, you can, whatever you want, Zelle it, whatever you want. What else? Yeah, we have sponsors for the show. We have John Baraban, who is a, he's been in the business of manufacturing vitamins and supplements for decades. He is constantly researching the space of health advice and workout advice and diet advice, and he tries to summarize it, integrate it, view it systematically, and then apply it in an individualistic kind of way, right? He has this motto of test, test, test. So don't just assume that because something worked in a study on 60% of the people that you're part of those 60%. Maybe you're in the 40% that doesn't work on. So you've got to test it on yourself, these things, and you've got to evaluate them. And he gives a lot of guidance on how to do that. You can find him on YouTube. Look, I'm John Baraban, Baraban. The link down below sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, but after the show it gets fixed. So you can probably click on the link after the show and get access to it. And he's a sponsor of the show and a fan. Has been part of the Yaron Brook Show for a very, very long time. Also, the Ayn Rand Institute. Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor, and right now they are taking scholarship applications for Ayn Rand conference in Brisbane, Australia. Ayn Rand Institute is coming to Australia with a conference for the first time. And that conference will be held on December 6th to 8th. You can't sign up for it yet, but you can apply for a scholarship. So if you're a student, if you're serious about studying objectivism, you don't have to be a student at a university, but a student of objectivism, then apply for a scholarship. Scholarships include travel, so you can come from Singapore, from Japan, from China, not North Korea. Well, you could, but I don't think they'll let you out. South Korea, Hong Kong, anyway, so please consider doing that. Apply for the scholarship, aynrand.org/start here, and the scholarship application is right there. And finally, Alex Epstein is a sponsor, alexepstein.substack.com. You can get his talking points on fossil fuels, on energy generally, and on environmentalism. He's the best mind in the business on these things, and his talking points incredibly, incredibly valuable. And Hunter just put something up about oil and gas. Alex is the #1 defender of oil and gas, and you can support him by subscribing to his Substack, by getting a more expensive subscription to Alex AI, which is being trained on Alex content. All right, let's jump in with the super chats here. By the way, I don't know about shows the rest of the week. We will see. I'm traveling within Spain. I'm actually going to Andorra. You ever heard of Andorra? It's a small country, tiny, not small. It's called a micro country. It's a micro country between France and Spain, up in the Pyrenees. It's actually going to be cold up there. I mean, cold for us, not cold objectively. The Principality of Andorra, it's a microstate. Anyway, we will, it depends on time, internet connection, all of that. I will be taking my equipment with me just in case, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. We'll be back here in this place. Hopefully the internet will be as stable as it has been today. I shouldn't say that because it's going to crash now any second. We'll definitely be back on Monday, but I will try to do some shows while we're on the road. Let's see, Shazbot. Shazbot says, I know you are going to do this anyway, but maybe this can bump Godzilla Minus One to the top of your review list since you have seen it already. Okay, I'll try to do that next week. Godzilla Plus One. I mean, yeah, it's that'll be fun. All right, Hunter, $50 also. Thank you, Shazbot. Thank you, Hunter. Really appreciate the support. Thanks for the oil and gas comments. I've mentioned before, I'm in oil and gas, the industry achieves, in spite of the shackles clasped on it by EPA, BLM, BIA, and state agencies, and its workers eat the public degeneration and keep working. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. This is, again, why I think, I mean, certainly you, Hunter, I'm sure you're already familiar with Alex, but everybody should be familiar with Alex, and everybody in the oil industry should be familiar with Alex because he provides you guys with real moral support. He provides you with the kind of sanction, the moral sanction that you guys deserve. So, yeah, I'm always happy to do oil and gas stories. Our civilization runs on oil and gas. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. We could not survive as a civilization without oil and gas. The people who work in that industry are amazing, and they suffer the slings and arrows of, I forget what Shakespeare says, but slings and arrows of the horrible treatment of the of public and politicians and intellectuals and environmentalists, and everybody hates them, and yet they continue to produce and continue to make our life possible, a good life possible. So, thumbs up to the oil and gas industry, absolutely. All right, I forgot to mention, you can support the show with stickers, like Super Chats, but without a question. So, if you guys want to support the show, if you guys want to see this continue, please consider doing a sticker right now. This is the one way in which you guys on live can support the show. You can also ask a question, as many people are doing. So please consider, we're a little short of where we need to be for the second hour. We've got another 30 minutes to make that up. So please jump in with a $20 sticker, a $2 sticker, $1 sticker, or a question, and a few $20 questions, and we're there. We make it 4 $50 questions, and we've completely got to our goal. All right, Brownie. If Israel is being attacked by a state adjacent to it, does Israel then have the right to annex the territory of its adjacent aggressor state? It absolutely has the right to do it. Whether it makes sense for Israel to do it is a different question. By annexing it, it has to take responsibility for the protection of the individual rights of the people there, and with all the constraints that places on them, particularly if those people continue to be hostile or continue to be problematic or have a different culture, have a different civilization. So absolutely they have the right to annex the space. The real fundamental question is it in Israel's interest to annex that territory, given the context? Thomas, is it possible that the Ukrainian goal is to take and hold some Russian territory that they will agree to evacuate if Russia evacuates all Ukrainian territory? Yes, I mean, that is what everybody's assuming their goal is, that this is a negotiating tactic. Even Putin mentioned this, that this is in anticipation of negotiations, where in those negotiations the Ukrainians will agree to leave Russian territory if the Russians leave Ukrainian territory. The challenge is this: they are pushing out, they're pushing into Russia. The further they go, the more difficult it is going to be to defend the territory. They could retreat and just occupy a small section that they can then viably defend. By doing that, by defending that territory, they will have to dedicate troops that could otherwise, I guess, be dedicated to trying to free Ukrainian territory. Maybe they think this is a better strategic shot. Maybe it is. But how far out are they going to go? The further out they go, the more difficult it will be, as I said, to defend. I just don't know. It makes complete sense to take Russian territory in order to then I'll give you yours back if you give me mine back. But over what time frame can they defend it? How well can they defend it? Remember, Russia has the capacity to recruit to its army hundreds of thousands of people. Ukraine has done very poorly in recruiting people to its army. So long term, the longer this goes on, and Russia has no problem just seeing its young people die in mass. It has a history of this. So I just don't, I don't know what the strategy is. I believe that is part of the strategy, Thomas, but exactly how they implement it, it's going to be fascinating to see. Adam, dictators and ayatollahs are simply criminal bosses, just on a larger scale. Will Harris' prosecutor experience in dealing with crime bosses help her in handling the dictators of Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, China, etc.? I doubt it. I don't see any reason that is possible. To really deal with dictators, one has to have principles. One has to have a view of foreign policy. One has to have a strategy around what to do with people like this and what to replace them and how to replace them. It is far more complicated than being just a prosecutor. A prosecutor does not have at their disposal an army. The prosecutor is not engaged in kind of foreign policy negotiations. A prosecutor prosecutes the law. But there is no law in international relations, right? There's a negation of law. Law doesn't exist. So you have to use blunt tools, or you have to use diplomacy, or you have to use, and there's no reason to believe that Kamala has any expertise in any of those, or that her prosecution, her experience as a prosecutor adds or subtracts in that respect. Ultimately, what matters is her character and her ideas, and I don't trust either one of those. Jennifer, do you think if Trump loses, they would try to pull the January 6th again? Yes, I think they will. I don't know. It depends on how badly he loses. It depends on whether he declares it a stolen election. It depends on a lot of moving pieces. But yes, I think they will do whatever they can to resist and to upend whatever election. I think they put people in place in different parts of the government and different parts of the kind of election monitoring systems to try to do this. The worst kind of Republicans in some of these districts controlling the levers of the elections. So yes, it's going to get dirty. There's no question it's going to get dirty. All right, let me remind you again that the Super Chat is open. Ask questions, submit stickers, support the show with your live participation. But the best way to do that is through the Super Chat. We've got a dearth of Super Chats suddenly since I asked you last time. It seems like everybody says, oh, he's asking us for money, so we're not going to give him any. It's supposed to work the other way around, guys. When I ask, you're supposed to give me more. So yes, so please consider making a contribution. Again, just you can do a $1.99. You can do $2.99 for those of you out there. How many of you out there have never contributed to the Yaron Brook Show, have never done a sticker or a super chat, and yet, or Patreon or PayPal, and yet listen to the show on a regular or semi-regular basis? Value for value, guys. You should pay for what you get. All right, Ryan says, what is stopping Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Tesla from forming a massive lobby organization to fund candidates that would vote to change antitrust laws? I imagine shareholders would back this. Maybe I'm just dreaming. Yeah, I think you're just dreaming. I think a lot would stop them. They'd have to believe that antitrust laws were no good. They'd have to have a view of what antitrust would be instead, or have a view of getting rid of them completely, which I don't think they have. They'd incur the wrath of the American people, I think. Americans believe that antitrust laws are what make America great again, right? They're what make our capitalism work. Not only the American people, most of our intellectuals, most of our economists support these things. If these companies ganged up together to try to lobby this, they would be demonized. They would be ridiculed, and I think the American culture would turn against them. This is why I say You don't change things. Things are going to have to change when the culture changes. Now, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, and whoever, if they spoke up more about this, if they talked about it more, if they described their objections to antitrust law, if they defended themselves better, if they had more self-esteem and they projected more self-esteem and they stood up in front of Congress and they explained what was going on, I think they would have a good shot of slowly participating in the education of Americans and in the changing of our culture. But to just lobby for it, I think, would be counterproductive in the long run, because I think that the too many Americans would turn against it. They have to start with education. Gail says, legal enforcers should be required to study economics. Yeah, but which economics? I mean, the economics that is studied today in schools completely supports the antitrust legislation, the antitrust laws, the antitrust execution. All right, let's see. Darlene, thank you for the sticker. David, thank you. David, thank you for the sticker. Let's see, we had a bunch of other stickers as well. Let me find everybody. Where are you? Tyler, thanks for the sticker, $20. Really appreciate that. Darlene again. Darlene, you get 2 stickers. Thank you, Darlene. David, the second sticker? No, I'm bouncing backwards. So, no, I'm going backwards. Let's go forwards. Who else do we have? Ryan, thank you, Ryan. Also asked a question. Okay, I think I got everybody. Richard, but you can also ask a question, do a sticker. If anybody can do 150, anything like that, that would be phenomenal, phenomenal. I need some of my whales to step in. Richard says, when will you have Alex Epstein on the show? How about a Gen Gorlin encore? I've had Alex on the show at least twice, maybe more. I'll have him on again, I'm sure. Alex is a friend and always happy to have him on. And those shows, we get a lot of super chat questions. So I'll definitely have Alex on sometime soon. So, and Gina as well, absolutely. I'm trying to get a wider variety of people. I'm trying to get more people on the show, but I will definitely go back to my regulars, and the 2 of them are definitely a part of the regular crew. Andrew says, society can strive to be the best you can be, but when a business actually makes it, it's you didn't build that, and taking them down a notch. Success in theory is acceptable, but not in practice. Yeah, I think that's right. And in theory, even in theory, it's only up to a point. Even the theory is against too much success, i.e. a dominant position in industry that is a kind of what they call a monopoly position. So, but yes, you didn't build that. We want you to go and create the jobs and do all the stuff, but remember, you didn't build that. And the more government gets involved, the more they argue that, without government, none of these things would happen. Lex Fridman has a better sense of life than most objectivists. Thoughts? I don't know. I mean, Lex Fridman certainly has, I think, a good sense of life, and he's been incredibly successful. And he's done a great job, and he's a great interviewer. Does he have a better sense of life than most objectivists? I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. But he's a good guy, and he's been influenced by Ayn Rand, and he's been influenced by me and the show. Maybe not, at some point, and he's been influenced by a lot of people. But it's hard to tell. It's hard to compare sense of lives from the outside. Andrew, the judge smeared Google as a monopolist. It is, in fact, a trader. Exclusivity agreements are moral and a sign of value of Google services. Yeah, why would anybody sign an exclusivity agreement with Google unless they wanted? They thought it was important to have Google on their platform because Google provided enormous value to the platform. Lucinda started watching Blackadder on your recommendation, Yaron. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it. It's that British humor. I think it's hysterical. Frank, Kamala, we believe in the collective. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, she's a collectivist. She's a statist. She's terrible. Philosophically, politically, she's awful. And I think if you ran a campaign, I think even if Trump ran a campaign basically attacking her on her actual positions, he would win. Because American people don't want Kamala's leftist ideas. It's a testament to how childish and pathetic and absurd Trump really is, the fact that he can do that. That instead he whines. Instead he just whines. Yeah, but Kamala's terrible. She's a real collectivist. By the way, as is J.D. Vance and as is Trump. They're terrible. They're all terrible. Let's see. All right, Raymond. How can militaries be economized and quality when it is inherently central planning, better than anarchy, but hard to develop in a monopoly? Well, I mean, this is the point about a military. It doesn't have to economize, and it doesn't have to. It has a relatively simple job, and that is defense. It has to be able to destroy the enemy faster than the enemy tries to destroy it. The real hard work when it comes to the military is strategy. And look, strategies can be done, Google has a dominant position in search. And it constantly strategizes and constantly works to become better. So, because it understands its incentives, it understands its market, it understands what it is doing, why it's doing, how it's doing. Force is something the government wields, and it knows how to wield it, and it can legitimately strategize and figure out how to best wield that force in defense of rights. What you want of a military is not economizing and constant progress. Militaries will not be very efficient economically. Where they need to be efficient is in the wielding of force. And history is filled with incredibly effective militaries wielding force. Look at America in World War II. Look how effectively the American military wielded force against, an amazing a foe that was incredibly strong. And the American military today is the strongest in the world and could take on anybody. Not because of competition, not because of market incentives, but there is competition, right? The U.S. military is constantly watching what the Chinese are doing, and is constantly trying to improve and match and strategize against them. It's not that there's no competition. There's plenty of competition. It's just not a market competition. There's plenty of signals, and there's plenty of counter strategies and countermeasures. So it is a monopoly. It should be a monopoly. It is the only way in which to legitimately and effectively wield force, and you've got to get the right people there, and then you have to view it as competition between states, and get your act together and become better. But force is what government does. Lucinda says, got to go now. We'll watch the rest of the show later. We'll probably finish all of Blackadder tomorrow. All of Blackadder, 4 seasons tomorrow. Been enjoying it, and my girlfriend also enjoyed the couple episodes she watched with me. There's also, I'll just in case you miss it, there's also an episode of Blackadder's Christmas Carol, which is excellent, which is kind of outside of the 4 seasons. So don't miss Blackadder's Christmas Carol. I like numbers. Who advised Trump to lock down? Fauci and Birx? I don't know who advised Trump to lock down. I'm not sure anybody advised Trump to lock down. You know, the lockdowns happened preliminarily in New York, and I don't know who made the call in New York, and then basically the lockdowns were a state thing, but Trump supported it. He criticized New York for not locking down earlier. The problem with, and we don't have time to go into all of this, but the problem with COVID is that Trump stuck his head in the sand, pretended there was no such thing as COVID, pretended there was no issue and no problem, so that by the time he suddenly realized things were happening, things were in emergency state. He, in the meantime, had basically sidelined the number one experts in the world in dealing with an epidemic, and those are the people at the CDC. He completely sidelined those. He put them, he refused to deal with them, and he elevated Fauci and Birx. Fauci and Birx weren't there at the beginning as the people you would have expected. Nobody expected Fauci to be the guy in a pandemic. They expected the CDC to run the pandemic response. It is Trump's decision to sideline the CDC. So no, Trump made all the bad decisions during COVID. The only good decision was the accelerated development of the vaccines. Everything else that Trump did was an absolute unmitigated disaster when it came to COVID. He criticized Georgia for opening up too soon. He criticized New York for not locking down fast enough. He was terrible on every single front, except the vaccine. Give him credit for that. And of course, he won't take credit for that. He'll never mention vaccines while he's running for president, because the people he's talking to, the MAGA people, hate the vaccines. They think they're poison. They think they're killing them. I think Tucker Carlson said the other night that one of the proudest things he's done in his life is not take the vaccine. Ian says, have you read Alan Greenspan's book, Capitalism in America? Curious if it's worth reading. Yeah, I think it's worth reading. There are definitely some really interesting, good things in it. Don't expect it to be a laissez-faire capitalist manifesto and a pro-capitalism and laissez-faire. He's definitely wishy-washy. But it is interesting, and it's got a lot of good history. A lot of good history about about markets in America. At least, I think I've only read about 2/3 of it, so I don't know what he says later on. I need to finish it. I'm actually kind of in the middle of it. Gail, maybe because companies like Intel are afraid to be experts in anything, knowing how oppressive government is. I don't think that's how it works. You know, Intel has just gone up and down in a very, very competitive industry. And it struggled in that very, very competitive industry. It's had periods where it's dominated the industry, and it's had periods where it's just dropped off. Jason, does one candidate buy us more time? If Harris could be ready by 26 to run candidates focused on 3 pre-capitalist ideas: end corporate welfare, deregulation, increased vetting, legal immigration. If Harris wins, could we be ready? Who is we? No, I don't think we'd be ready with those. I don't think the country is ready for end corporate welfare, deregulation, and vetting legal immigration. I just don't. I don't think the country's ready for that. Now, I don't know who buys us time and how it works. I think Trump shortens any horizon because he kills the Republican Party. I think if Trump loses, there's a chance that the Republican Party becomes marginally better. How much better, I don't know. Whether that much better, I'm skeptical. Apollo Zeus. Is John Baraban related to Robert Baraban, Robert being an exercise equipment manufacturer? I don't know. He's never mentioned it if he is. Andrew, as you roam around Spain, do you think that the West enjoys luxury too much to let it fall down? That is, if the economy seriously went south, would the public turn against statism, the statism causing it? I don't know. It's very hard to tell. I mean, People in Spain are doing okay, but it's relatively poor, certainly relative to the United States in terms of the size of the houses they have, the cars they have, the income, disposable income that they have. They have certain things that are better than the U.S., fruits and vegetables, for example. But, the standard of living is lower, and Spaniards travel, and they know the standard of living elsewhere is higher, and why aren't they demanding higher standard of living and what that entails? They have a socialist government in power in Madrid. They have I'm in Catalonia, in Barcelona. They have a socialist government here in Catalonia. Why do they keep reverting to socialism if they're not willing to give up? So I don't know. I mean, the death of the West is not going to be one big major event. It's going to be a slow decline, just like the death of Rome was a slow decline. So I don't expect them to go, oh, we're not going to give that up any more than the Romans said, we're not going to give tiled roofs and beautiful pottery and beautiful mosaic floors. We're not going to give that up. No, we're going to fight against whatever. They didn't. At the end, they gave it up. They gave it all up, and they gave up their lives on top of that. I don't think that's coming quite as bad, but I don't think economics drives things. I mean, economic well-being drives things. Hunter, I'm reading ominous parallels. Nazi leadership clearly knew what it meant when talking about subjugating the individual. When Kamala says, I believe in the collective, she has no clue what she means. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I don't think she's definitely not at the level of the evil and the level of intellectuality that the Nazis or the Germans or the communists had. I mean, Lenin knew exactly what he was talking about. So did Stalin, so did Trotsky, so did all those guys. Kamala is a nothing. I mean that's a virtue, I think, is that she is a nothing. She will go where the winds push her, which is not necessarily good, given the winds in the Democratic Party will push her in bad directions. But she's not an ideologue. She doesn't understand. She's not a thinker. I don't think she's that intelligent. So I agree with you. I don't think she has a clue what she means. Andrew, I think Trump calling Kamala's candidacy a coup is evidence of why he is unelectable. He couldn't care less the impact of his irresponsible rhetoric. Yes, and of course it's stupid. I mean, there's no coup. I mean, Biden withdrew, and Biden should have withdrawn. It was the right thing to do. Everybody knew it. Everybody saw it. Arguably, Trump was calling for it. And he didn't give up power. So it certainly wasn't a coup even by that measure. He stopped running for something. Yeah, he was influenced by other people who told him he should stop running. Okay, can't get advice anymore. All right, finally, Apollo. Oh, we might have another question. Apollo says, favorite type of fries? Straight, slim cut, thin cut, crinkle cut, or curly? I don't know. I'm not into fries. The only fries I like, and I don't eat them that often, are sweet potato fries. Fries generally are not the healthiest food, full of oil. Simple carb, filled with oil, and usually not a very good oil on top of that. So I don't eat fries typically. Sweet potato fries sometimes. Do you plan on going to, this is Rue Downs, do you plan on going to Azador Exclusivity? It's a #1 restaurant in my bucket list. I've been wanting to go a number of times, but it is every time I'm near it, it's closed. They take a big summer vacation. Usually they're closed August and September, something like that. And every time we've been in San Sebastian or anywhere close, it's been closed. So I haven't had a chance to go. I am on the wait list for the #1 restaurant in the world, Disfrutur, here in Barcelona. Anyway, a restaurant we've been at before, but we're trying to get into. It's ranked #1 right now in the world. And we're going to a bunch of we're going to go to a bunch of good restaurants in Barcelona and in the area. All right, let's see. Oyvind Safadin released a debate he had with Konstantin Kisin about Israel-Palestine. Safadin used ad hominem attacks the entire debate, and in the end basically called him a racist NPC. Pure crazy. Yeah, I mean, this is he holds an irrational and evil position. He is wrong. He's fundamentally wrong. He didn't go ad hominem in the debate with me. But he, I think all the facts were on my side and reality was on my side, and he knows it. And the more he debates, the more he'll become panicky and hysterical and go to the ad hominems. That is the pattern of somebody who knows he's losing. All right, everybody. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the super chats, the support. I will see you all. I don't know when. Keep tuned. I'll try to give you some. I know I didn't give a lot of notice today. Very short notice today. I'll try to give you more notice next time. It's 11. It's already 11 p.m. here, so I am going to go to sleep, and I will see you all next few days. Bye, everybody.